So yes, I'm going to celebrate this victory because I'm going to take every moment we can. But we could have perhaps done a little bit better. And I think that the fact that this policy allows us to build housing and earmark it for 40 years, and hopefully the rent control programs are going to be in place when the 40-year plus 1 day kicks in, so we can maybe extend it for another 50 years. This is a government asset that at some point in time may no longer be affordable housing. And so I just wanted to sort of highlight the fact that it is very, very difficult, as we all know, Madam Speaker, in the chambers, to advocate for affordable housing. And we have to get the orders of government to work together better. It should not have taken 4.5 years for us to get to this point, but it did. So I'd like us to think that, moving forward to the next few phases, and there are other assets, both provincially, federally, and municipally, that will be on the floor for consideration as surplus land and disposal for market value. We have to do better by ourselves and with the other orders of government. 15 Wellesley is a parking lot owned by the Toronto Parking Authority. And they're in the same process right now about thinking about what are they going to do with that site. Of course, they want to declare it as surplus. We've had numerous conversations about what are they going to do with that site directly across from Wellesley subway station. And at every single meeting, I brought up affordable housing, and at every single meeting, they come back and it's not on the table. So I don't know what it will take in order for us to make sure that when the city disposes its own assets, we actually live by the policies that we're trying to develop to make sure that whatever we do with our own assets, we're going to meet those city objectives that we've already set. And we said there's a housing crisis, and we have to meet the needs.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Layton.
Yes, thank you very much. Despite our Chair of Planning and Growth's warning not to be critical of our affordable housing policy, I'm going to make one exception, not be critical at what the city has been doing this past term, because I did support the program as it came through, but critical of the province for limiting the toolbox that we have. Our friends at the Star have just quoted me from a previous discussion. We have a crappy toolbox for how to do this. We have endorsed and asked the province to give us more powers to use inclusionary zoning clauses, to come up with better ways of increasing the amount of affordable housing in each and every development, rather than us scrambling together and stacking programs and pulling stuff out of Section 37 and out of our ears and from up our sleeves, just trying to hobble together one or two development proposals. We have come a long way, and much to the credit of the leadership of Build Toronto and perhaps the Mayor's office in what we've been able to accomplish from some of our city properties. I remember there was a time when Build Toronto came to me with the sale of 2 sites, and I said, how much affordable housing? And they said, none. And I said, well, weren't you supposed to build us all this affordable housing? And they said they had done 6 of 1,500 units, 12 of 1,500 units to that point. They'd had like 4 years to come up with that and hadn't done a damn thing. So when the next proposal came to my desk that Build came up, my first phone call was to Sean Gadden to say, hey, Sean, you got an opportunity here. They got to build you these units. So they came back with 25. Oh, boy. There was, in that whole development proposal of about 1,200 units, 25 affordable ones. The city owned the land. We approved 5 buildings on it, and that's all we could scrape together. Now, in that case, at least we got something. But unless the province moves on this inclusionary zoning, every day that goes by, every planning application that comes through that door at city planning is a loss of potential affordable housing units to the City of Toronto. And in the decade that the city's asked for this power, we could have been building thousands of units. I don't have the number because our acting chief planner didn't have it off the top of his head. But I know that this number exists, and I know it's in the many thousands of units that would have been created in the past decade in multi-unit residential housing had we had the power and the regulatory authority to use inclusionary zoning as a means for achieving our affordable housing goals. So it's not at the city's fault that we're doing such a poor job at building affordable housing. It is in fact rests in the hands of the provincial government, who have not given us the tools to properly zone them in all new development. Thank you.
Yeah, I think it's died 3 times. Right?
Thank you. Councillor Perks.
Thank you, Speaker. I want to begin by absolutely making it clear that the work of the Affordable Housing Office, that the work of the Chair of the Affordable Housing Committee, and the work of the Mayor have been outstanding. They have been outstanding. The fact that we're doing anything at all, Mr. Mayor, your work has been outstanding. But within the but that outstanding work takes place within a set of parameters. It takes place within a set of parameters where we set a yardstick 9 years ago, I believe, of 1,000 units a year. And the fact that we're finally close to that, or maybe even a little bit over, is an achievement. But it's not the achievement we need. I was at a meeting in Parkdale with a group of 50 tenants who live at a variety of addresses who are losing their homes. Largely through legal means, although in one instance through an illegal eviction. And when you say to them, you know, we have this policy around rental retention, and we you know, I put Section 37 agreements in on any development application in my ward that's big enough, and there's a problem there. Most of the mid-rise isn't big enough to generate Section 37, so you can't put affordable housing in. When you say to them, well, you know, we're trying, they just say, you do understand that I have 2 choices now. I can leave Toronto or live on the street. And they're not exaggerating. They're not exaggerating at all. We are losing deeply affordable units faster than we're building them in the City of Toronto. And I see Mr. Gadden nodding his head. So I put it to this Council, maybe not today when we're considering the great work we've done within the confines of the world that we operate in. Maybe today we celebrate, but by the end of this term, we need a better yardstick. Simply having a number of units that we provide incentives for, or that we build, or that we get federal money for, that's not a good enough yardstick. Our official plan states quite clearly that every neighbourhood in the City of Toronto should be able to provide housing and services to people across a mix of income. And we are not achieving that. And I think now that we've got, you know, open door and some federal money and some provincial money, it's time for us as a council to step back and say, how do we devise policy and financial planning that gets us to what the official plan describes, to the vision that I believe we all share, which are truly inclusive neighborhoods. Neighborhoods and also circumstances so that when someone is living in a unit and the owner decides to knock it down and there are fewer than 6 because that owner can make a whole lot of money putting in higher end units, there's somewhere for that person to go in the neighborhood. So yes, we've done outstanding work. Yes, Mr. Mayor, you've done outstanding work, but we need to do better than outstanding because there is a crisis. There's a crisis in supportive housing, there is a crisis in deeply affordable housing, and there's a crisis for the children of the middle class who will not get the same housing opportunities that I and my partner had when we got into the housing market 20 years ago. So take the win today, but let us commit as a council that we are going to revisit this and come up with new tools. We might have to lead, because I don't think what the federal and provincial government's offering is enough. But let's make our neighborhoods truly mixed income again. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mayor
Thank
Tory.
you, Madam Deputy Speaker. First of all, could I just begin? There's been a lot of people who I think quite correctly said as we've gone through this I think very constructive debate that they, were working at this a long time ago in some cases, and that includes Councillor Wong-Tam, and it includes our staff, some of whom sound like they were working on it and they were in the prior century. Certainly, Councillor Bailão in her time here has been a relentless advocate on all this, and I just want to say thank you, because the fact is you don't get to these places without a lot of that hard work and without a lot of the frustration that I think all of us feel sometimes with the way the government process works generally, which is that in order to get these kinds of things done, you have to have the support of at least 2 or sometimes 3 governments, and that isn't always possible, and that certainly was true in this case. And I want to say the same is true of BUILD. I mean, BUILD, and Councillor Shiner had a lot to do with this. I'm the first to say so. He went over there as the chair. He was already there, I think, and he became the chair. And he noted correctly that during its first number of years, basically all it did was sell land and give us money. And I guess that was fine. We needed the money. But in the end, it had also committed itself, and right in its original mandate were some provisions that said they were to produce a certain number of affordable housing units per year, and the number they were producing was goose egg, 0. And they're now producing quite literally hundreds of affordable housing units over a period of time. And so, you know, we're making progress. And I guess I find this kind of bogus hair splitting that's gone on in some of the media just that, bogus hair splitting. And I think maybe that point is driven home when you have across this chamber Councillor Shiner and Councillor Fletcher and Councillor Perks and a number of others saying, look, actually, this does represent progress. And I'd be the first to stand up here and say it. I was teasing Councillor Perks about repeating his compliment to me, and Councillor Layton almost got there. He said perhaps the Mayor's office had done something. Well, you know, he's just easing in. But I'll be the first to stand up here and give credit where credit is due, and it isn't about me, and it isn't about my efforts alone. It's been a team effort here where first of all, we made the commitment to actually do something. And the bogus hair splitting I'm talking about is whether you call it create or support or approve or fund, the bottom line is that you have to go in an orderly process, and Councillor Fletcher put this very well. You have to put out the incentive so people know what's in it, you know, for them to be part of this. You then have to approve the allocation of the money so that anybody who's going to step up and compete for the right to build the affordable housing knows what's available. You have to do the funding. You have to reach out to have the competition and say who wants to come in and build the affordable housing. You then have to select somebody. You have to then have them do a design and a plan. We then have to approve that. And then it's built, and then it's occupied. And this is not a sort of 21-day process. And again, I'm not meaning to be critical of anybody, but if there was a huge pipeline of stuff that had started into that long series of steps that I just went through 5 years ago, then we would be here today saying, wow, it's fantastic, let's go cut the ribbon on some new affordable units for people. But there weren't. So that's fine. It's history. It doesn't matter. But the bottom line is we're now doing this together. The province has come to the table. I think that's because we as a council and as a city took a strong stand saying to the province, you have some land, you can put this up as we have done. And I think the first thing we did collectively was put up some of our own land, so we, you know, said do as we're doing, not as we're saying. And now I have repeated, as recently as this afternoon when I spoke to the media, a call on the federal government to do the same thing. I know they're looking at their land holdings, but looking at them and offering some of them up, as the province has done, are two entirely separate things. And so the bottom line is, I want to just take yes for an answer, that's all, without for a minute being complacent about this. And I actually endorse much of the comment made by Councillor Perks in terms of how, and by, I think it was Councillor Wong-Tam who talked about the fact we need more tools. And, you know, I'll be honest, if you go and look at my initial answer I gave probably 3 or 4 years ago on inclusionary zoning, it was a waffle that the International House of Pancakes would be proud of. And I now believe, having sat here and watched, and the private sector people, you know, when you give them either the right stick or the right carrot or a little bit of combination of carrot and stick, they will do a great job building affordable housing for us. But I realize sometimes the carrot isn't enough, or we'd have to have a carrot so huge that we just wouldn't be able to do it, even with the help of the other governments. So there's got to be a bit of a stick. And so you'll find me, I mean, subject to the rules being fair to us, because frankly the first rules the province put forward were unfair to us, saying, yes, that is something we must do. We must have them get on with that, get going with that, so that we can in turn use that in a positive way to make sure that we can meet the challenge of affordable housing. And of course, it's huge, but I will finish on this note. If you take together the progress of the last 4 weeks, and I want to give credit again to Premier Kathleen Wynne and in particular to Housing Minister Peter Milchin, because when the Housing Minister changed, a lot seemed to change with that. And so we have in the last 2 weeks $90 million for supportive housing, which will help 2,000 people of the kind of the people that Councillor Perks and others here were talking about. And this, just today, and the stuff we've done so far this year will help 1,000 people. And if we do that every year, year after year, and you can't underestimate my determination and Councillor Barlow's, and I know all of you, we will actually make a meaningful but by no means enough dent in all this, and we will have more to do. But at least we can carry on with the progress we're making. And I thank you for standing firm when we were standing in there, wanting this land to be put up that will allow this matter here to be brought today, and the tremendous and absolutely unstinting leadership of Councillor Barlow, who really does take this to heart, and Sean Gadden, who, among all the staff, is somebody who's been making his life's work out of this, and we appreciate that. Thank you, Madam Speaker.